Having a reliable contract in place is crucial for every private investigator to ensure they protect themselves as well as their clients. But that is easy to say, but not so easy to understand. So let's go over the secrets to the must-haves for your contract in detail. First off, let me say I am not an attorney, nor do I play one on YouTube or TV for that matter, and none of this should be considered legal advice. Let me also state this, I don't always have a contract in place for every client. For example, for attorney clients that I work with all of the time, I do not necessarily enter into an agreement for every case. But when I onboard a new attorney client, I will usually provide them with a copy of my contract so they understand how my company operates and what they can expect from me, as we use our contract as the foundation for our company policies. That said, though, if it is a new attorney client, I will usually ask for a retainer agreement or contract for the first case or two. And this is good policy, as many times those first-time attorney clients are one-off clients. So once the job is done, I don't hear from them again for various reasons, like they're out of state or they don't usually use investigators. And here is a major mind blower for many PIs out there. I have never, ever had an attorney refuse to sign our agreement either. I have also never had an attorney refuse to pay a retainer up front either, and this is highly contradictory to what many PIs think. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. Now, sometimes the case is fairly small, not too detailed, not too complicated, so then I opt for using a simple LOE or letter of engagement. But even with these, I usually require a prepaid retainer which covers the entirety of the case as it is explained in the agreement. In order to understand what we need to have in our contract, we need to first answer the question, why is a contract necessary in the first place? Well, the first answer to this is that we want to get paid for the work we do. And having a well-written contract will spell out all the terms that we will be working under, the billing rates, and how payment is received. And for me, well, I believe in the easy payment plan. 100% down, 0 payments for the rest of your life. Or in other words, a full retainer paid up front. The bottom line, folks, is that your private investigator contract will maximize your protection and help mitigate losses should things go south with your client. The contract needs to lay out in clear detail the penalties for not paying or for chargebacks on credit cards. The contract also needs to help you manage client expectations. It needs to lay out in detail, but not too great of detail, what the scope of the work will be and what the client can expect to get, as well as what they can't expect to get from the work you will conduct. Here is a big secret about private investigator clients. Most, especially when it comes to the general public, the clients out there, simply do not have a realistic understanding of the investigative processes and procedures involved in our investigations. They don't know what limitations are placed on us due to licensing laws and other regulations that are out there. They don't understand the ramifications of what can happen if we do the wrong thing while conducting their investigation. I get this all the time when clients call. This is an easy case. I just need to know how much you will charge me. And when I ask them why they think it should be easy, well, they simply do not understand the complexities of an investigation. They think we can just go sit in our car for an hour or so and catch their spouse cheating. They think we can use tracking devices to follow people. They think we can just jump on the internet and see all of their social media activity with little to no problem. Our job is to let the client know this isn't Magnum PI, this isn't CSI Miami, this is nothing like what the TV and the movies depict. And that leads to why you must have an indemnification clause in your contract. This will protect you from any perceived liabilities that could arise from the investigation. Many times our investigations turn up less than expected results for our clients. There was no smoking gun to be found, and this can lead to what we refer to as buyer's remorse. I remember one infidelity case we had that went over the course of a year. The client was absolutely sure her husband was cheating, and she was sure that every time he came to Colorado on a skiing trip, he was going to meet up with his girlfriend. And given that, despite the fact that he always brought their 3 kids, and despite the fact that he always invited her to join, she was sure if she didn't come along, it would be the perfect time for him to slip up. So we went up the mountain with several investigators each time, and we picked up our surveillance starting at a little mountain town airport where he and the kids arrived in their private jet. And we followed them around all week just to watch him being a loving, caring, and kind father. The only times he ever met anyone was with known business partners, never anyone he was having an affair with. And each time the client had the same response. Well, he didn't do it this time. Now she never had buyer's remorse. She never doubted whether or not we were doing our job. Not only did our investigation conclude that he did not meet up with anyone during the trip, it also did not conclude that he was not having an affair. We just presented the facts of what we observed, and that is all we can really do. Now, your PI contract must have several key aspects to it. It needs to clearly state what each party can expect from the other party. In order to do this, it also needs to clearly define who is involved in the investigation and what the scope of the investigation is. For an infidelity investigation, it should state that you are conducting an infidelity investigation on Mrs. Jones, and that the investigation will include some level of surveillance, background checks, and other factors that may be involved. It also should detail the fact that there is no guarantee to the outcome or success of the investigation either. You also need to ensure that your contract is clear and straightforward with no ambiguous language in it. It should be well written, it should be simple enough for anyone to understand, and it should be written from an ethical and legal standpoint. It is so easy for us PIs to put in all of the legal jargon we can think of to help protect ourselves, but we forget to think about, is it easy to understand? Is it legal? Ethical? Can we really put that in a contract? I know some PIs who have what is called a disparagement clause in their contract. This basically forbids the client from ever saying anything bad about them, to include on social media or even on internet reviews. But this is highly illegal in most, if not all, states. And it isn't illegal just for PIs. It is illegal for any contract from a consumer protection standpoint. Many times, that is the only avenue a client has to refute someone that they have done business with. And those PIs think they are protected because they also have a clause that states if any part of the contract is found to be non-enforceable, it does not cancel the contract or make any other part of the contract non-binding. Well, eventually the law will catch up to those PIs and they will find out differently the hard way. Here are some other highly important must-have things to include in your contract. Party identification is key for sure. You need to have a statement that identifies all parties involved, and it needs to have a clarifying identification name for reference throughout the contract. So it needs to state who the client is and that they are the client. And it needs to state who your company is, and that you are the agency, for instance. The contract must have the date of the contract in it. I know, you would think that is a no-brainer, but I have seen many contracts in my day with no effective date. Some people think if there is a date next to the signature line, that is enough. But based on my experience, it is always best to have some statement at the beginning of the contract that states, on this day, these parties agree to this. It is easy to argue that the date by the signature is just the day it was signed, but the agreement date was prior to then, or even in the future. And you can't forget the scope or service in your contract. This needs to be clearly defined, but not limiting either. In other words, if it is an infidelity investigation, it might say conduct an infidelity investigation to include surveillance, but it shouldn't just say conducting surveillance unless that is all that will be done. Now, there is a big secret to keep in mind regarding disclosing information when it comes to database reports, OSINT, and other information, which we will discuss here in a moment too. Payment terms and fees is another must-have section for your PI contract. You need to clearly state what the retainer will be and how you will bill for time, mileage, expenses, and any other fees. This is usually spelled out in a way like this. The client shall pay X dollars to the agency as an initial retainer and to initiate the investigation. This clearly spells out it is an initial retainer and that the investigation does not start until the retainer is paid. Then you can have a terms statement that says something to the effect that all work will be billed at X dollars per hour, plus mileage at X costs and other necessary expenses. The necessary expenses part is a bit ambiguous, but you just never know if you're going to have to pay tolls, parking, meals, and other things, especially for surveillance-related cases. Then there is the important part of your contract, the communications clause. This will basically state how and when you will communicate with the client. It needs to detail when and if they will get updates during the investigation and when they will get a final report. It is also good if this states how those communications will happen, like via email or phone updates. Let's also discuss the necessity for a termination clause. This will explain how each party can terminate the contract. The termination clause may also include something to the effect that once the retainer has been exhausted, the investigation will conclude. Now, I always want to have a continuation clause in there too. This is where I state that should future retainers be paid for by the client and accepted by the agency, the contractual agreement will be extended until those additional retainer fees are exhausted. This allows for more work without requiring a new contract. As well, it affords you, the PI, the ability to not accept the additional retainer fees should you not want to continue the work. Now, one clause that is often forgot about or often is misused in contracts is the confidentiality clause. This needs to clearly state that both parties will keep everything confidential. The big part that many contracts fail to have is that this is a two-way confidential statement. Oftentimes, I see this as the client has to keep everything confidential, but not the party providing the service. And when it comes to PIs, well, most PI licensing out there will require that you hold everything confidential. Now, before we get into the three biggest things that most PI contracts don't have, let's also discuss the signature lines. Yes, your contract must have a signature line with a place for the name of the signer, the signature, the date, and what party they are in the contract, client or agency. Again, I have seen some that just have a place at the bottom that says signature and a line. And that gives very little information, and it leaves a huge loophole open for someone to say the entire contract is not enforceable. Here is one of three big things that most PI contracts don't have, but they should have. And most PI contracts don't have these things because most PIs get a basic services contract template off the internet and start writing their own contract based on what that template has in it. First is a data provided disclosure. You must tell your client that any data provided by your databases, online resources, government agencies is not guaranteed, and it could have errors in the data, and that all data should be independently verified. Now, you, as the investigator, should be verifying that data is accurate yourself, but you need this clause to cover your six just in case. You also need to have a non-interference clause in your contract. This simply says if the client interferes with the investigation in any way, you, the agency, have the right to cancel the agreement and the client forfeits any retainers paid. I know this sounds harsh, but if the client is driving past you while you're out there doing surveillance, well, that jeopardizes a lot more than just your cover. If your client is constantly calling you for updates while you're out in the field working, that complicates things well beyond what you may be able to deal with. Remember, your contract is also the foundation for your processes and your procedures and your policies. It lays down the foundation of how you will operate and what the client can expect and can or cannot do. This is also why I have a no guarantees clause in my contract as well. This simply states that we do not guarantee the outcome of the investigation, and the client agrees to this and understands that we cannot guarantee what the investigation will find. Now, in a nutshell, folks, that is everything that must be in your contract. Now, I am not an attorney, nor do I play one on YouTube or TV for that matter, and none of this should be considered legal advice. Now, I have written this book right here, Contracts for Private Investigators, Secrets No One Else Will Tell You, that will walk you through step by step as you write your own personalized PI contract. I also have available for download the sample PI contract that the book outlines too. So if you just want the contract so you can edit it for yourself, you can get that on my website, howtobeapi.com. And if you want a free copy of my basic contract, my engagement agreement or letter of engagement, you can get that on my website too, www.howtobeapi.com.